Welcome. This is Dr. Lesliam Quirós-Alcalá, and this module is on immigrant workers. Here are the learning objectives for this module. In this section, we will cover some demographics about immigrants in the United States, including the immigrant labor force, and select guest worker programs in the United States and how these often fail to protect workers. So according to the U.S. Census Bureau of Labor Statistics, the term immigrants, also referred to as foreign-born, includes anyone who is not a U.S. citizen at birth, including those who become U.S. citizens through naturalization. Immigrants, or foreign-born populations, include naturalized citizens, permanent residents, also referred to as lawful permanent residents, as well as persons on student or work visas, those admitted under refugee or asylum status, and undocumented people residing in the United States. Now first, let's talk about some of the reasons for migration. Migrants leave their country of origin for several reasons, including increased poverty due to financial hardship and food insecurity in their country of origin, to seek better opportunities in terms of employment and education, to seek refuge and asylum due to violence and conflict in their home country, also deliberate recruitment for employment, and lastly, displacement from natural disasters. So as of 2019, close to 45 million immigrants lived in the United States, more than double the 1990 number, representing nearly 14% of the country's total population, the highest share since 1910. These close to 45 million immigrants in the United States make up about 1/6 of all international migrants in the world. As shown by the bottom line on this figure, while the 14% foreign-born share of the overall U.S. population is near the previous U.S. peaks, of 14.8% in 1890 and 14.7% in 1910, it still falls below many countries. It is reported that a little over half of all immigrants in the United States are female. So where are immigrants coming from? This figure shows the immigrant population in the United States between 1960 and 2021 by region of birth. Here, we can see a major shift in origins, from mostly European to predominantly Latin American and Asian, and more recently, African countries. This shift has occurred as a result of significant changes in U.S. immigration and refugee laws, the growing U.S. economic and military presence in Asia and Latin America, and economic transformations and political instability in key sending countries. It is estimated that by the year 2050, more than 25% of the U.S. population will be of Hispanic or Latino descent, and that Hispanics will make up 15% of the U.S. workforce. So where are Latino immigrant populations coming from? In this figure from the Migration Policy Institute, we can see the U.S. trends on migrants from Latin America from 2008 through 2022. As can be seen in this figure, after nearly a decade of migration from Latin America, largely from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, migration to the United States from well beyond these traditional sending countries is increasing. In 2022, migrants from beyond Mexico and northern Central America accounted for 43% of those encountered between ports of entry at the U.S.-Mexico border, compared to 4% around 2017. The other category that you see on this figure includes migrants from Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. These newer countries of origin have strained diplomatic ties with the United States, making established practices for the return of their nationals inoperative. These changing trends result from simultaneous increases in Venezuelan arrivals and decreases in Honduran and Guatemalan encounters over the later portion of 2022. The top 5 countries where migrants are coming from as of 2022 include Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Cuba, and Venezuela, together comprising an estimated 71% of all encounters between ports of entry. Now, when we take a look at immigrants in the U.S. labor force, as of 2019, it is estimated that immigrants constituted 17%, or close to 29 million people, of the civilian labor force. The civilian labor force refers to civilians 16 years of age and older who were either employed or unemployed, but looking for work in the week prior to participating in the American Community Survey or decennial census conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau. In the United States, participation of immigrants in the labor force has more than tripled since the 1970s, when immigrants accounted for an estimated 5% of the civilian labor force. According to the U.S. Census Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2021, about 48% of the foreign-born labor force was Hispanic, and 1/4 was Asian. This, in comparison to native-born Hispanics and Asians in the labor force, which made up 12% and 2% respectively. Now, in terms of types of jobs immigrants perform, Immigrants make up significant shares of the U.S. workforce in a range of industries. According to the United States Census Bureau data from 2019, for workers 16 years of age and older, the largest share, which was 35%, worked in management, professional, and related occupations, followed by those working in the service sector. The service sector includes industries such as food services, hospitality, sanitation, and cleaning services, as well as nail and beauty salon industry, and many others. It's critical to note that foreign-born workers make up a large majority of occupations, including construction and agriculture, two industries with the highest fatality rates. For example, according to the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics, data repeatedly show that immigrants and workers of color are more likely to suffer injuries or even die from dangerous working conditions. Particularly, Latino workers are more likely to die in the workplace compared to other racial and ethnic groups. It is reported that deaths among all Latino workers have been steadily increasing. In 2020, the number of Latino worker deaths was 1,072, similar to 2019, and the Latino fatality rate increased to 4.5 per 100,000 workers in 2020, which is 32% greater than the national average. Of those who died in 2020, 65% were immigrants. Given the increased risk of fatalities and injuries faced by workers of color and immigrant workers, it is critical to enhance efforts to protect these vulnerable workers. It is also important to highlight that these rates do not include deaths suffered from the global COVID-19 pandemic, and to recognize that Latinos and other immigrants made up a large portion of essential workers that remained at work during the COVID-19 pandemic. These workers were at an increased risk of COVID-19 infection in addition to other workplace hazards. In terms of education, immigrants in the United States are concentrated at both ends of the educational spectrum. Data from the U.S. Census Bureau 2019 American Community Survey indicate that about a third of adult immigrants had a college degree or more, while close to 50% had a high school education or less education. Now, among the immigrant workforce that has some type of higher education beyond high school, it is estimated that nearly 2 million immigrants with college degrees are unemployed or hold low-skilled jobs in the United States. This skill underutilization, which is a phenomenon also referred to as brain waste, varies significantly by state. Several factors have been linked to brain waste, including proficiency in the host country language, which is consistently reported to be the most critical skill that immigrants need to succeed in the labor market. Place of education also plays a role. It is reported that those who come to the United States after they're 25 years of age are more likely to be employed in low-skilled jobs compared to those who arrived before the age of 12. Another contributing factor to brain waste is documentation or authorization status. It is reported that low-skilled employment trends are higher among workers who are undocumented and permanent residents who obtain residential status in the United States through government-mandated statutes. Another factor includes race and ethnicity, with Hispanics reported to be the most disadvantaged group. And lastly, field of study where science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM fields, are the least impacted. Now, before moving on to select guest worker programs available to immigrants in the United States, I wanted to briefly mention a few facts about refugees and asylum seekers. Refugees include those who are unable or unwilling to return to their country of nationality due to persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. While an asylum seeker is a person who meets the definition of refugee and is already present in the United States or is seeking admission at a port of entry. Refugees are required to apply for lawful permanent resident status, or a green card, 1 year after being admitted to the United States, and asylees may apply for green card status 1 year after they have been granted asylum. Both refugees and asylum seekers are eligible for many of the mainstream benefits, including Medicaid, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, also known as food stamps, childcare subsidies, and supplemental security income, even though they're often unaware of this. Refugees may receive assistance through the State Department-funded Reception and Placement Program, including assistance with upfront expenses and help enrolling in employment services or school and applying for Social Security cards, among other benefits. For more details on benefits that refugees and asylum seekers can claim, please visit the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Citizenship and Immigration Services website. I wanted to briefly talk about select current guest worker programs in the United States. Currently, the United States has 2 guest worker programs for temporary work lasting less than a year, which include the H-2A program for temporary agricultural work and the H-2B program for temporary non-agricultural work. These programs allow employers to obtain permission to hire foreign workers on temporary visas after engaging in recruitment in the United States and having promised to meet certain requirements regarding recruitment, wages, and/or working conditions. Each program imposes a temporary, non-immigrant status that actually ties workers to particular employers and makes their ability to obtain a visa dependent on the willingness of the employer to make a request to the U.S. government. However, history has shown that foreign guest workers who hold restricted status in the United States are vulnerable to workplace abuses, some of which we will cover in the next few slides. So the H-2A program, which is specifically for temporary agricultural work, includes certain longstanding worker protections. These include the fact that wages must be at least the higher of either A, the local prevailing wage as determined by the Department of Labor and state agencies, or B, the state or federal minimum wage, or C, the adverse effect wage rate, which is the average wage of non-supervisory field and livestock workers as determined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture survey. Under H-2A provisions, employers must use the Interstate Employment Service System. This is a joint system of the federal government and state workforce agencies and private market methods of recruiting workers known as positive recruitment that is used to locate U.S. workers. In addition, H-2A employers must hire any qualified, eligible U.S. worker who applies for the job opportunity until 50% of the period of the work contract has elapsed. Additionally, employers must offer U.S. workers terms and working conditions that are not less favorable than those offered to H-2A workers. Under the H-2A program, employers must also provide recruited workers with employment opportunities for at least 3/4 or 75% of the total number of hours in the job offer or pay for any shortfall. This is meant to protect against over-recruitment that is designed to reduce wages and assures migrants who travel long distances that the job will be worth their trip. For workers who complete half the season, the employer has to reimburse transportation and subsistence expenses associated with traveling to the place of employment. While for workers who complete the entire season, employers must pay the workers' transportation expenses associated with returning home. Employers must also provide housing for their workers at no cost that meets federal and state safety standards. This includes adequate sanitation, water supply, restroom, laundry, and bathing facilities, as well as pest control. However, in reality, workers frequently report poor housing, including dirty, cramped, unsanitary, and/or pest-ridden dwellings. Employers soliciting H-2A workers must also provide workers' compensation insurance for workplace injuries, but not health insurance coverage. However, complex workers' compensation rules, which vary from state to state, often prevent H-2A workers from accessing these benefits, especially after they have returned to their home country, which the program demands. Workers who are seriously injured and their families are thus never compensated for the lost income from their injury. Unfortunately, employers may encourage workers not to apply for benefits, may simply return injured workers to their home countries, or may get injuries taken care of quietly in order to prevent a hike in insurance premiums. In addition, H-2A workers with health issues are often fired or coerced to sign voluntary quit forms in exchange for unenforceable promises that they will be hired at a later time. When workers return home to their home countries, it is very difficult for them to pursue their workers' compensation claim, and oftentimes comprehensive medical care is not available or accessible. So other ways in which the H-2A program fails workers is by driving down wages and working conditions of U.S. workers and depriving foreign workers of economic bargaining power and the opportunity to gain political representation. The H-2A program's protections for U.S. workers and against exploitation of guest workers by employers are modest. In fact, they are similar to those in the Bracero program that took place between 1942 and 1964 and was terminated due to its notorious labor abuses. Also, violations of the rights of U.S. workers and guest workers under the H-2A program employers are rampant and systemic. The U.S. Department of Labor, which is responsible for administering the H-2A program, routinely approves illegal job terms in the H-2A workers' contracts. U.S. workers who apply for H-2A jobs are often rejected or forced to quit, and workers at H-2A employers routinely experience wage theft and other unlawful practices. Abuses in the recruitment of foreign workers are also prevalent. H-2A employers and their recruiting agents in Mexico and other poor countries exploit the vulnerability of foreign citizens. Many guest workers have to pay recruiters for H-2A jobs and enter the U.S. in debt, desperate for work, and fearful that the loss of their job will lead to serious financial losses. In fact, it is reported that the H-2A recruitment system has led to numerous documented cases of debt peonage, human trafficking, and forced labor. Moreover, over half of the farm workers on United States farms and ranches lack authorized immigration status. The presence of so many undocumented workers deprives all farm workers of bargaining power and political influence. Deporting all or most undocumented farm workers would be costly and impractical, inflict harm on many hardworking farm workers and their families, and deprive agriculture of the workforce it needs to produce our crops and livestock. The other guest worker program available in the United States that I wanted to mention is the H-2B program. This program is for temporary guest workers that do non-agricultural work. It allows U.S. employers to hire workers from other countries on temporary work permits to fill these jobs that last less than 1 year. The H-2B workers are commonly found in the landscaping, forestry, seafood processing, and hospitality industries. Unlike the H-2A agricultural guest worker program, which has no limits on the number of H-2A workers who can be brought into the United States, there is a cap on the number of work visas that can be issued under this H-2B program. As of 2022, under the Immigration and Nationality Act, the cap on the total number of non-citizens who may receive an H-2B visa is 66,000 per fiscal year. Now, just like the H-2A program, the H-2B program also fails to protect workers. For one, it ties guest workers to a single employer sponsor without the ability to change jobs. This makes the worker's ability to obtain and retain status in the United States entirely dependent on remaining on good terms with their employer. As such, this program makes it easy for employers to treat workers as disposable commodities, using their labor and then disposing of them if they complain about anything related to their job, or if they educate other workers about their legal rights, or even if they are non-compliant with employer demands. H-2B guest workers are often afraid to be sent back to their home countries because they often arrive in the United States with huge debts paid to recruiters for recruitment fees and travel. These debts are also exacerbated by high interest rates charged by the moneylender, who charges extremely high rates of interest, typically under illegal conditions, and whose help they sought to pay their recruitment and travel fees. Additionally, fraudulent recruiters are often unaccountable for their actions because recruiters often misrepresent the terms and conditions of employment opportunities in the United States. Also, because the U.S. government does not require foreign recruiters to register or to even agree to follow U.S. law. So in essence, there is nothing promoting non-fraudulent behaviors. Lastly, there is no U.S. government oversight mechanism to ensure that guest workers are not abused after they arrive in the United States, or that the contracts that workers sign with recruiters are honored after the workers are here and under the control of their employer sponsors. In summary, a large proportion of migrants come to the United States from Latin American countries. This demographic also suffers the highest job fatality rate in the United States. It is also estimated that about 50% of immigrants have a high school education or less. The phenomenon of brain waste is also prevalent, where highly educated immigrants are unemployed or must take on low-skilled, low-paying jobs in the United States. Lastly, U.S. guest worker programs often fail to protect workers, leading to perpetual systemic abuse cycles.